López Mateos, presidente, Gustavo Díaz Ordaz, presidente, y Luis Echeverría, presidente, trabajaban para la CIA, eran activos de la CIA. Estamos hablando del presidente de la República. Este es el delito de traición a la patria.
Traición a la patria.
Y traición a la patria es el único delito por el cual se puede destituir al presidente de México. Entonces, 3 presidentes mexicanos consecutivos se podían haber destituido por traición a la patria.
No lo va a creer. Archivos del asesinato de John F. Kennedy, que apenas ayer desclasificaron, muestran que la CIA tenía reclutados como agentes a altos funcionarios mexicanos durante los gobiernos de los presidentes Adolfo López Mateos y Gustavo Díaz Ordaz. Un día después del asesinato de Kennedy, en noviembre de 1963, el entonces subsecretario de Gobernación Luis Echeverría recibió instrucciones de la CIA para detener e interrogar en secreto a sospechosos del caso. ¿Sabe quién cumplió la misión? El capitán, entonces capitán Fernando Gutiérrez Barrios, que luego se volvió secretario de Gobernación.
Entre los documentos desconocidos hasta ahora se encuentran informes de la Agencia Central de Inteligencia que muestran la participación del gobierno de Gustavo Díaz Ordaz en la investigación, pero no solamente como cooperación, sino como el presidente Gustavo Díaz Ordaz recibía instrucciones de la CIA sobre cómo proceder en la investigación y el entonces secretario de Gobernación, Luis Echeverría, informaba personalmente al jefe de la CIA de los avances.
Buenas noches, bienvenidas y bienvenidos, gracias de nuevo por estar en este programa y gracias al colega periodista mexicano Raimundo Rivapalacio que se encuentra en este estudio. Buenas noches, Raimundo, gracias por estar aquí.
Encantado, Carmen, muy buenas
Gracias por
noches.
estar aquí, director del sitio Eje Central y bueno, pues colaborador en diferentes espacios, Raimundo Rivapalacio.
La CIA tenía 4 operaciones simultáneas en México. Tenía Leinboy, que era intercepción telefónica, tenía Liemti, que vigilaba la embajada soviética, Amspel, que tenía infiltrado al director estudiantil cubano, y Lierode, que vigilaba la embajada cubana. Y el Litempo tenía se llamaba el Litempo por esto. Li era la codificación de la CIA, de lo que significaba la CIA. Y Tempo era el tipo de funcionario. Entonces era la CIA en México y qué funcionario. Y se asignaban números. Litempo 2 era el presidente Gustavo Díaz Ordaz. Entonces Winston Scott le pide a Gustavo Díaz Ordaz que detenga a Silvia Durán. Y en los documentos dice, el gobierno mexicano debe de tomar plena responsabilidad de este asunto. Nosotros no debemos aparecer. Y eso es lo que hace el gobierno mexicano. Y detienen a Silvia Durán, pasa a la Secretaría de Gobernación, el secretario de Gobernación, Luis Echeverría, informó de manera pormenorizada a Winston Scott, el jefe de sección de la CIA, qué es lo que estaba diciendo, cómo iba la información. Y la transcripción del interrogatorio se la dan a la CIA. ¿Sabes quién hizo el interrogatorio?
¿Quién?
Era otro Litempo, Fernando Gutiérrez Barrios.
Fernando Gutiérrez Barrios.
Litempo.
¿Él hizo el interrogatorio de Silvia Durán?
Exactamente.
Wow.
Y ahí está. Eso nunca no se sabía.
No, bueno,
se conocía lo de Silvia Durán. Lo que no sabía es la manera subordinada, de manera estructurada del gobierno de López Mateos ante Winston Scott y quienes habían participado directamente.
Mencionaste a Díaz Ordaz.
Sí, presidente. Díaz Ordaz.
Y López Mateos, estamos hablando de los dos momentos, ¿no?
López Mateos era presidente cuando fue
el asesinato, sí. Y luego la investigación.
Exactamente.
Entonces, en el momento del asesinato participa de una manera u otra el gobierno de López Mateos.
Porque la parte más intensa de la investigación es entre 64 y 67. López Mateos se ve en el 64. López Mateos, presidente, Gustavo Díaz Ordaz, presidente, y Luis Echeverría, presidente, trabajaban para la CIA. Eran activos de la CIA. No estaban en la nómina de los agentes, pero eran activos y por eso tenían la clasificación. No tengo yo el dato de qué número de Litempo era López Mateos. Díaz Ordaz era Litempo 2, Echeverría era Litempo 8, Fernando Gutiérrez Barrios era Litempo 4. Para cuando veas los documentos y veas los Litempos, ahí ahí están las claves. Entonces hay algunas claves de esta naturaleza que si no conoces ese contexto, no te dice nada.
bien.
Pero resulta que si es Litempo, le dicen a Litempo 2 que haga eso y Litempo 2 hace eso, estamos hablando del presidente de la República. ¿Por qué decía un juez que revisó estos documentos hace 20 años que esto podría haber derrocado al gobierno de México en su momento? Sí, México hubiera sido una democracia, pero si hubiera sido una democracia, esto era trabajar para un gobierno extranjero. Este es el delito de traición a la patria.
Traición a la patria.
Y traición a la patria es el único delito por el cual se puede destituir al presidente de México. Entonces, 3 presidentes mexicanos consecutivos se podían haber destituido por traición a la patria.
And something that really interests us is the connection between the CIA and Mexican politics, which takes up a section of your book, and as you mentioned, other sections focus on Kennedy and Oswald. You describe how 3 Mexican presidents were paid CIA agents under Win Scott's Litempo program. You reveal great stories, such as how Winston Scott, the Mexico City CIA chief, had lunch every Sunday with President Adolfo López Mateos, who even became his padrino or godfather. Could you tell us how this came to be, and what is the greater meaning of this?
Well, the story about Win Scott and the Mexican presidents was actually the biggest news that was made by this book, and it was big news in Mexico when the book was published, and there was a lot of coverage there. So it's a very important story. Win Scott was trying to ingratiate himself and advance American interests in Mexico in the 60s, and this was a very, it was a revolutionary period. And what the CIA was worried about was Fidel Castro was very, very popular in Mexico. He was popular because he was a revolutionary. He was popular because he had taken on a dictator and won. He was popular because he was anti-American, and there was lots of anti-American sentiment in Mexico, lots of nationalistic feeling. So Fidel Castro was very popular, and the CIA was worried about this spreading, this revolutionary fervor from Castro to Mexico itself. And at that time, the PRI was, the only party there was. It was not like it is today. It was a one-party state, and so, Castro posed a threat to the Mexican system, and Win Scott was trying to deter or defeat that threat, and that's why he wanted to get the Mexican presidents on his side. They needed to do something. Otherwise, all of Latin America was going to go communist. That's what they feared. And so what he was trying to do was bring Mexico on their side. And it was a very tricky job because no Mexican president could be openly pro-American. That was just not, Mexican national feeling was not going to allow that. So these kind of secret arrangements between the Mexican presidents became the way that the Mexican presidents preferred to deal with it. And that was also the way in which Win Scott preferred to deal with it, because he was a CIA man. He wanted to keep it all hush hush. So, but it was a very important time, and it was and Win Scott was very successful. People did not know people suspected it at the time, how influential the CIA was. But until my book came along, nobody really knew for sure.
And this connection between, the CIA and the Mexican officials, do you think it was more balanced, mutual benefit, or was this who had the greater amount of control here?
That's a very good question. And I wish that I had spent more time in Mexico to answer that from the Mexican point of view. In the eyes of the CIA, it was very successful. It was a very successful relationship, and Win Scott was praised very highly. And the proof is that in normal CIA procedure is when the CIA sends somebody to a country, typically they stay there 3 years, sometimes 4, but rarely longer than that, because you don't want to you don't want to overstay your welcome. You don't want people to figure out who you are. And so Win Scott got to stay in Mexico City for 13 years. So that was a sign that the CIA approved very much of what he wanted to do. But, the Mexicans got a lot out of this too. I mean, they got some money under the table from Win Scott. They got a lot of support from the American government in other forms of development assistance, technology. The Mexican security forces were modernized in the 1960s with the help of the CIA. They got the latest in wiretapping equipment, surveillance technology, all of these things. So the Mexicans, they got a lot of intelligence about their enemies on the left, who, they had the common enemy of the CIA. So the Mexican presidents, got a lot out of it. They were keen to encourage this relationship, just like Win Scott was. But it also varied between the Mexican officials. Fernando Gutierrez Barrios, the head of the security forces, was a very powerful man in his own right and was very good friends with Win Scott. Gutierrez Barrios was also very good friends with Raul and Fidel Castro. And so he was playing this double game of, he would be friends with both sides. And I think that that was one reason why he lasted so long in the Mexican system. He was the head of the security forces from the 60s to the 80s. So he was a guy who amassed tremendous power, in part from his relationship with the CIA.
And you mentioned the Mexican security services. We saw 1968 Tlatelolco and 1971 Corpus Christi under both Diaz Ordaz and Luis Echeverria, when the Mexican government repressed and killed hundreds, if not thousands, of Mexican citizens. Do you think the Mexican paramilitary who carried out these atrocities were trained at the School of the Americas? Did you come across any?
No, I don't think they were. And this is a peculiarity of Mexico. Most of the military and security forces in Latin America were trained at School of the Americas, but the Mexicans, because of domestic politics, never wanted to be that closely affiliated with the United States, and so they kept their distance.
So my question is about the drug trafficking problem here in Mexico and the cartels. Because sometimes I wonder if it's like, if even the CIA or the U.S. government is kind of involved with that trafficking and the drug cartels and everything in order to maintain Mexico stabilized and not as developed. I mean, it's kind of a harsh way to view it, but it seems like it could be a possibility because, well, America is it has a history of doing that kind of thing.
Yes, no, it's a very good question. So first of all, I should say, this is not what my research has concerned. So I can't claim, like I can talk about Mexico in the 1960s in a more detailed way. But, it's a very fair question. I mean, I wouldn't say, the CIA created the cartels or supported the cartels, but, their job was intelligence, and I'm sure they made it their business to figure out what was going on, and that involves getting to know people. And the drug traffickers play the exact same game back, right? There's an advantage to knowing people from the CIA. There's an advantage to knowing people in the DEA, and so the cartels themselves would cultivate such relationships. And would the United States use that towards its own ends? I have to believe they would.
Bueno, dígame, señor presidente. Fidel. Sí, ¿cómo está usted? ¿Cómo estás? Muy bien, muchas gracias. Ahí te va, déjame terminar. Sí. Déjame terminar. Que puedas venir el jueves. Sí. Que participes en la sesión y hagas tu presentación, como sí. Está reservado el espacio para Cuba, la una. Después tenemos un almuerzo que ofrece el gobernador del estado a los jefes de estado. Inclusive te ofrezco y te invito a que estuvieras en ese almuerzo, inclusive que te sientes a mi lado y que terminado el evento y la participación, digamos, ya te regresaras. Y así...
A la isla de Cuba.
No, bueno,
pues, ¿a dónde va el hotel? Dígame.
A la isla de Cuba o a donde tú gustaras ir. Fidel,
sí, dígame.
¿Te puedo pedir otro favor?
Dígame.
Que estando en casa a mí me serviría muchísimo.
Sí.
Que no hubiera declaraciones sobre el tema de la embajada o de las relaciones México-Cuba o ese evento que vivimos en estos días pasados.
Yo no tengo ninguna necesidad de hacer declaraciones ahí.
Ah, qué bueno.
Dígame, ¿en qué más puedo servirlo?
Pues básicamente, y el no agredir a Estados Unidos o presidente Bush, sino
circunscribirnos. Señor presidente, yo soy un individuo que llevo como 43 años en política y sé las cosas que hago y las que debo hacer. No le quepa la menor duda de eso. Que yo deseo decir la verdad con decencia y con la elegancia necesaria.